What's up, y'all? Rayshawn here, and I hope you've been having a fabulous February. This month has been super busy with all the things with homecoming and other events on campus. And for our podcast episode today, I thought it would be really fun and interesting to focus on some departments on campus that we don't always get to talk about, but bring such value to our campus. The first is the Department of English and World Languages, and we have Dr. Seretha Williams, who is the chair of that department, to talk to us not only about her department, but one of my favorite subjects, which is music. I did not study music. I am not necessarily musically inclined, but I do give a great shower concert, car concert. But she's going to talk to us a little bit about how one of her favorite genres of music, can't get that word out for a second, has made a big impact on the world today. And super cool is how her department and some of our humanities courses kind of helps bridge that gap and help us kind of understand it, and talks about literature, how it meets music. So that's going to be fun. And then stay tuned, because we also have the world-renowned musician Wycliffe Gordon, who is the director of our Jazz Studies program, to talk to us a little bit about his neck of the woods and how the Department of Music comes together to support jazz, how he teaches jazz. And because I said he is a performer, so he is just coming off of one of his jazz cruises, which is really cool. So we're going to talk a little bit about that and a little more music stuff. So stay tuned, and here we go. Welcome, Dr. Williams, on the show. Super excited to have you. How are you today?
I'm good. I'm so glad to be here with you. I know we've been trying to do this for a while, so I made it.
Yes, you finally made it on the show. Just to give our listeners some context, can you share a little bit about your background and your journey to becoming the chair of the Department of English and World Languages?
Okay, yeah. So I'm originally from Gary, Indiana, which is 30 miles outside of Chicago. So we're right on Lake Michigan. Bulls territory, not Pacers territory.
Okay.
So I grew up there, and then I went to Northwestern in Evanston, Illinois, came down to Georgia. Go Dogs, University of Georgia, did my graduate school there. And as I was studying there, I saw an ad for a job at what was then Augusta State University. And I was like, what's that? And I tried it. It's the only academic job I ever applied to.
Oh,
and
wow.
I got the very first one that I applied to. I wasn't even intending on being a professor. And here I am 25 years later, still at, this institution, coming from our legacy institutions, and a professor of English, and now have been the department chair since fall of 2020.
25 years.
Yes.
What has kept you for 25 years here?
So, in part, this was a great place for me to raise my kids. I have 3 kids. And then also, I really wanted to work with the specific student population that we have here at Augusta University. I wanted to work with non-traditional students, traditional students, international students, all different kinds of students. And so I didn't want to go someplace where all of the students were like 18 and 22. I wanted to get a good mix, and that's been my experience here. So that's what keeps me here. And now I'm mostly working with faculty and trying to help them achieve their professional goals. And that's been fun also.
Well, that's awesome. Well, way back when, you were also my professor.
Yes.
And for some of the other professors that have come on the show, I've asked them, and I'm going to ask you the same question. Mm-hmm. What do you remember about me when I was a student?
You had a lot to say, and you had opinions. And what I liked was that you talked to me after class. So a lot of times the students are running out of the building, and but you would hang back and ask questions. And so I think I got to know you in that way after class. You didn't say as much in class as you did outside of class. And every time I would see you after you had even taken the classes with me, you're like, hey, and I was like, hey. And then when you came back here to work, I was like, I'm glad we're so happy. I'm so happy that we were smart enough to get you back here. So,
Aw.
yes.
Well, I've really enjoyed being here. So, yeah, I'm glad to be on this side of things.
So I'm not surprised that you're talking for a living.
Yeah, a while back I had saw a post like for folks that always got talked too much on your report cards. What are you doing now? And I'm like, I'm a
Talking.
podcaster.
Me too. I was the person. That's the thing that I got on my report card also. She talks too much. There we go. In training, professor in training.
Podcaster in
There
training.
we go.
For today, we really wanted to talk to you a little bit about that intersection between literature and music, because we know that you're a fan of certain genres like house music, dance hall. From your standpoint, what does that intersection look like between literature and that type of music?
Yeah, so just kind of thinking about this connection. I'll just start. I'll put my humanities 2001, 2002 cap on and say that from the beginning we didn't used to separate like song and poetry. So the first things like lyrics were actually poems that were composed and meant to be accompanied with a stringed instrument. So now we kind of think of lyrics as just the words, but that's not the origin of that particular word. And even when we kind of move to early Renaissance and we have the development of the sonnet, which means little sound or little song, once that form begins to be printed, then what we want to do is to maintain the musicality of the lyrics of the words. And so then we have the structure. I won't put you on the spot and ask you if you remember the sonnet in the form. I won't do that to you.
I appreciate it.
But so that is the whole thing, that there is like the words and the musicality, they go together. The same is true in sub-Saharan African cultural and musical traditions. The same is true for the African diaspora musical traditions, that we have like words and the music, the instrumentation going together. They tell stories. Even if it doesn't have words, we're telling a story. We're saying, just kind of like, where do we go? What's the tension? There's some kind of a character. We're building up to something. Something has to be resolved at the end of it. And what does it make you feel, right? So the music, the instrumentation makes you feel something. The words influence that whole idea. And so I think that that when we're thinking about today's rappers, that they're definitely poets, that they have kind of reminded us of that connection that we've always had. There's always been, instrumentation of some sorts going along with the words. Yeah, I think that that's the best way to describe what we're thinking about today.
And how did, I guess, you get into or fall in love with this type of work? Because I feel like it's very, in a way, like niche.
The music?
Yeah, for the music, and also just being able to, I guess, break down and study literature the way that you do.
Yeah, so I love analysis. As an undergrad, I was a journalism major, and I always knew I wanted to write, and I do still write creatively. But most of my writing now is academic. But I love the analysis part of it. I want to break it down and say, like, what does it mean? I like the layers. I want to, think about how all of the parts make up the whole. A lot of times, like, poets are always like referring to somebody else's work. And I want to be able to know, oh yeah, that's a reference to so-and-so, right? So we have like allusion, this kind of intertextuality. The writers are always speaking to each other. You're having a conversation across, across space, across time, throughout the years. And I just really want to know, like, what are those connections? I love being able to look at something and say, oh, okay, that's where this person got this particular thing from. They're in conversation with each other. And so I think that's the reason why I like house music also, because we have all those references. House music starts really kind of its inception in New York. Okay, Chicago people, don't come for me. But it does. So we have a lot of the DJs, and there's a disco that's happening in New York, and those disco DJs, disco is dying out, and so they end up in Chicago. and kind of forming a different kind of a music that we now know as house music. And they're playing around. They're playing around with different like technologies because this is technological kind of music, but also they're also kind of tied to that tradition. So they're alluding to these different things. House. Oh well, when I say house music, I'm almost always talking about 80s, 90s, which is the epitome. That's the golden era of house music. And they have a lot of references. They are sampling. And so like if you liked disco, if you liked funk or soul or whatever it was that you were into, you could hear those samples in the music. And so I think of that as intertextuality. And I'm having a conversation. I'm having multiple conversations all at the same time. And then house music, it just kind of like washes over you and it almost overwhelms you. And I call it, it is spiritual in many ways. And so the same way I'm having like an analytical, intellectual experience when I'm reading, I'm also doing that when I'm listening to house music.
I love that. And particularly with that genre, like Black artists, Black musicians have really played a significant role in creating this genre. How do you perceive or I say our, like I'm a musician, but how do you perceive their impact in the genre?
I mean, house music is international and it goes international even before hip hop, right? So it kind of lays a foundation for this transcontinental exchange. If you go to Europe, people may call it techno or EDM, but I mean, EDM and techno, garage, and all of those forms they have this connection to back to Chicago, back to disco, back to house music, and so we're having this conversation. I can go to Europe and go into a dance spot, a club, and hear something, and enjoy it in the same way. So just kind of building culture. That's what house music has always meant, and so I think about like the foundations that were laid by folks like Frankie Knuckles and Terry Hunter and so on and so forth. And I brought my list because I don't want to forget people, so I'm going to make sure that I insert some of those names as well. That we are indebted to them for making music that is not just regional specific. And I won't say that they were the first, but they definitely laid a foundation. And now we see like hip hop basically being an international genre, something that starts here. Of course, we could go and say that jazz before this kind of electronic music does that. So again, we see this kind of building. But I don't know. I still feel like even jazz didn't pull people together in the same way that like this dance music, this house music or electronic music has done. Something about the accessibility. If people can actually get into it, and there's not, I don't know, a barrier for them to be able to understand what's going on in a way that like some people feel that about jazz, that there's a little bit more nuance that you have to be able to understand to be able to appreciate it fully, but you don't really have that same kind of a barrier when you're dealing with like electronic music.
So for those watching and listening who are saying like, oh, I've never really thought about this genre before, I've never really paid much attention to it, what would be like your starter guide? Like, who are the musicians you would recommend off the top of your head of like?
Okay, so now I'm pulling out my paper.
Okay.
I have it right here because I don't want to forget. And I knew I was going to be asked this kind of a question, so I broke it down into a couple of different things.
Yeah,
so,
help us get started.
All right, so for like the DJs,
Okay.
and let me set the scene. So back in the 80s, house music, there wasn't just house music being played on the radio all the time. We would listen to WBMX, Chicago radio station, and it only came on, the house music section only came on at a certain time of night. And so you would have to go run and get your cassette tapes so that you could tape the hot mixes, which is what they were called. And so they would have like different DJs come in and do a special mix of this music. And so you wanted to make sure you got in there and you could do that. And so some of the people that you would hear on the radio then, Terry Hunter, Frankie Knuckles, Steve Silk Hurley, Jamie Principle, Farley Jack Master Funk, Farley, Lil Lewis, Mr. Fingers, goes on. So those are kind of like some staples. But then there were some bands, and I wanted to mention two. Ten City, Ten City, was a group out of Chicago, and then one of my favorite groups is Inner City, coming out of Detroit. And yes, there's house music, and there's a connection to Detroit. There's a battle between the Chicago folks and the Detroit folks in terms of like who, like. Has the best house music. You know, I'm always going to stick with Chicago, but I live closer to them. So, but I don't have a dog in that fight. And then I would just want to mention the house divas, because a lot of people don't kind of center the women, that it seems like this is a masculine kind of a feel, but that is not true. There's Barbara Tucker and Martha Wash and Robin S. and Cece Pennison and Crystal Waters, and the list goes on and on and on. So I just wanted to make sure that I get their voices in here. And the other thing that I wanted to say is that this music becomes popular in the gay nightclubs in Chicago. And so in terms of talking about a community, this is really important. So this is kind of liberation music as well. People could go to clubs and dance and be who they wanted to be. So that's a really important part of the story of the development of house music that we have to make sure that we articulate.
Would you say this genre was, like, you were always a fan of this genre, or did you kind of have a coming of age story into falling in love with this genre?
Probably it's going to be high school. And so I always loved disco. So this is the thing. I'm a 70s baby. So disco, funk, all of this stuff, you know, Donna Summers, I'm all over it. And then in high school, you know, you start getting exposed to different things. And there was a group of DJs in Gary, Indiana, known as Disco Enterprise. And so they were doing all of the parties. And so then they brought like house music to Gary. So if you went to any of the parties, like the sock hops, the parties and things like that, you would hear this kind of a music. And then there was another group when I was in high school. So we're talking the 80s, the early 80s. And those... the politicians, it was a dance group, and they were kind of centered in my high school. And so I would see all of these guys, and they had their particular kind of way of dressing. They were like you know, you might think they were a gang, but like they were kind of dressed like Prince. Old Prince with the purple collars and that kind of that look. And they would dance. And they would just be dancing. And I mean, it was, you know, it was awesome. So we would listen to that kind of a music. And I think as a teenager, I was trying to figure out how to express my own self. And I wanted to be free as well. And that's the music that just touched my soul and made me feel like I could be free and just dance and just do whatever it was that I wanted to do. More so, I was listening to rap. I was listening to rap and R&B and all the other things. But for me, I've been a house head since the 80s. So.
House head. That's my first time hearing that one.
Yeah, that's what if you listen to house, you're a house head. So.
Okay.
Yep.
I learn something new every day. So as a professor and the department chair of English and World Languages, how does your department kind of integrate cultural perspectives into the work that y'all teach students?
I think each professor does it a little bit differently, and I was thinking specifically about music, and so we have Adam Deal, who's a senior lecturer in our department, and he went viral, I think around 2014, 2015, because he did a class on Kendrick Lamar's album, right? And so then that was all in the news. He really did go viral. And so now he actually is one of the people that whenever somebody else is like doing a class on like hip hop or something like that, they contact Adam. So we're really happy about that. Yeah, he's really good. He's a musician himself. And so that is kind of the foundation of the classes that he teaches composition. He teaches the Humanities 2010 course for us as well. So I know he does that. I know that I have had students when I was teaching them about Afrofuturism, we had playlists. So we're on Spotify. We have to generate a playlist. Janelle Monae is all over that. And so I think everybody is in terms of trying to bring music into it, it just makes sense if you do the humanities. Like putting these things together, like film and music and literature, makes a lot of sense. In our department, we pride ourselves on being the main people on campus, bringing the diverse perspectives. We center that in all of our classes. We try to make sure that we have lots of different perspectives and voices represented on our syllabi, and we talk about different topics.
How would you explain the value of having those diverse perspectives, especially just as someone who teaches humanities? Because some people, especially for their first time coming to college campus, they're like, why do I need to learn more about these other people? I'm here to get this type of degree. How do you kind of explain that to those who may not be familiar, or this is their first time experiencing a humanities type of course?
Right. Well, college is not just about getting a job. That's my first place. So you're here to develop as a young person, as a human being, as a citizen. And humanities is one of those things. So we like to say that, yeah, I mean, you have to get a doctor's degree in order to be a medical doctor, but you need to come over here and take some humanities so that you know how to treat those people like humans. Bedside manner comes from the humanities side of the campus. I just think it's really important, even if you don't walk away with a degree, and we want everybody to walk away with a degree, I want you to be able to make sense of yourself. A lot of people kind of think about the troubles that they have, and like how do you cope with like all of the horrible things happening to you during the pandemic. You see, the first thing that we did was we turned to music. We were turning to DJ D Nice and we were listening to that, and we had all of these different things. Like how do we come together? How do we make sense of the world around us? Those are the things that humanities can do, and doing it in the class setting, because then you have somebody that's helping you to curate, right? A reading list, a playlist of things that you will then go on and maybe read further. So even if you feel like this is not a thing that you need to become certified in whatever it is you want to be certified in, like it's the how do I be human element that you will get taking those kinds of classes. And actually, I will even say, before you remember a formula, I bet you remember something that you learned in one of your humanities classes. You'll remember it. I meet students all the time, and they're like, yeah, I didn't really want to take the class, but then now I remember such and such and such and such. That's the humanities.
Well, while we have you here for a little while longer, I want to play a fun little game with you.
All right.
Okay. So I have a whiteboard here for you.
All right.
And because you are a writer, I pictured you would be great with words. So this game is called One Word.
Okay.
And so I'm going to give you some artists or maybe an album that they've done. And I want you to write that one word that first comes to mind about them or their work. So first up is Diana Ross.
Ooh. Want me to show you?
I'm ready.
Okay. Muscles.
Muscles.
There's a song that she has. It's very provocative. It was very, was not what we thought that Diana Ross would do, after her career with the Supremes. And so, look up that song, I Want Muscles. That is a very different kind of a Diana Ross song.
Okay.
And so that's the first thing that came to my mind.
Okay. Next up is Donna Summer.
Ooh. Okay. I'll say dynamic. Yeah.
I like
one
that.
of my favorite performers, song. I mean, just to have that quality of a singing voice applied to disco. I mean, because not everybody singing disco were singers.
Yeah.
Like she could sing.
Yeah.
And, just kind of the quality of that music really just stays with me. So just dynamic in every sense of the word.
I love her music.
Yes.
Next up is Grace Jones.
Ooh. I'm giving her innovator. I mean, really, so when you think about Grace Jones, another really good singer that I think people sleep on Grace Jones because she was a model and an actress and also a singer. She really understood how to use her voice to send the messages that she wanted to send. So strong, so clear. I really like the clarity of her voice. So yeah, very innovative.
Yeah, and I like that word because I feel like for her, she came in at a time where being like that triple, quadruple threat wasn't as popular. Right now, it's like you have to be all those things to kind of get the attention, but she was doing it at a time where it's like you didn't really have to, but you still
Right.
were able to.
And she challenged beauty notions. And I think that's a really important component that she was, a beautiful woman, but not in the traditional sense that, we had originally thought. And so in that respect, she was innovative as well.
Next up, one of my favorites, Janelle Monae.
Oh, that's one of my daughter's favorites. Shout out to Damaris. And she just went to the Janelle Monae concert that was in Atlanta.
I'm jealous.
Yes. Let's see. Oh man, let's see. I'm just gonna say, I think she's perfect. She's perfect.
Oh.
I mean, really, I do. I just, I spend a lot of time thinking about Janelle Monae because I use her as an example of like this kind of Afrofuturism in Black music. And so just kind of thinking about her whole body of work in terms of like creating different worlds, other worlds, and kind of thinking about different ways of understanding gender and bodies. And I mean, she does it all. She's a great storyteller. And that's the thing that I always think about her. And then, of course, now she's an actress. I mean, I just think she's perfect.
Oh.
She's perfect.
And last, but definitely not least, Beyonce.
Okay. Can I have more than this to say that? I think, and I'm gonna write it. I'll say like that Beyonce is a role changer. So we have this image of. I mean, we've had other people. We have Mariah Carey. We've had Diana Ross. We've had like all of these women who kind of are change makers. But I think that Beyonce does something very different. I haven't been able to kind of like put my finger on what the difference is because, I have this conversation. My kids don't know how dope Janet Jackson was, which I just think is a travesty, And when we were having this conversation, I was just like, yeah, so like somebody like Janet Jackson was like doing all of these different things. But then kind of like the longevity of her legacy. I mean, I think people still know Janet is Janet, but for some reason, I think that Beyonce is going to maybe even have a different kind of longevity, that she's really changing the game. She's changing the role of like the pop singer. And that's what I meant by a role changer, that you don't have to be just one kind of a thing and one sound, because if you listen to early Beyonce, right, with Destiny's Child, it's a very different sound. And even like, in early on in her singing career, it's different. She's more Houston now. She's okay with that. And the fact that she kind of brings those additional elements in, she doesn't feel the pressure of like, say, a Whitney Houston to be perfect, right? And I really appreciate that because we see how devastating it is to try to live in a world and live up to everybody's expectations. Beyonce sets her own expectations.
That was very well said. And just kind of wrapping up here, are there any upcoming like projects or initiatives your department is doing that people who love this genre may be interested in, or people who want to learn more about the humanities, or?
Okay, so I have a couple things
Okay.
that I wanted we're going to have, and I had to write this down. We're having our African American read-in February. So the first one is a creative writing workshop on February 22nd from 10 a.m. to 11:15 a.m. All of this will be on the calendar. And then the next day on the 23rd, we're having the African American read-in. Both of these are being keynoted by Dr. Cheryl Hobson, and some people may recognize that name because she used to be a professor here at Augusta University. She's now at Western Kentucky, but she's coming back, and she's a poet. And in her poetry, she uses music all the time. So if you read her poetry, you'll see she likes a lot of R&B. So there's going to be some Luther Vandross in there somewhere.
Nice.
So yes, and Whitney Houston is her favorite. And so I think that anybody interested in that, coming and seeing Dr. Hobson, they'll get a kick out of that.
Thank you so much, Dr. Williams, for being here. I'm super excited to check out the African American Read-In, and also check out some of these artists you mentioned, because all of them I'm not necessarily familiar with, but yeah, it's going to be a fun car ride on the way home.
Yeah, get on YouTube. They're all there.
With the JAG mobile app, you can now discover and filter events that match your interests. Your tasks for success at AU will be right there in your current tasks. Finish them, and they automatically move to the completed task section. But that's not all. With the JAG mobile app, you'll receive targeted push notifications that are relevant to you. No more irrelevant alerts clogging up your phone. Stay in the know without the noise. JAG Mobile's messaging feature lets you see which events they're attending, the groups they're joining, and the conversations they're engaging in. It's the ultimate social and academic networking tool.
Wycliffe, welcome to In the Wild. Thanks for being here. You have some really exciting performances coming up, because I want to just dive right in. Can you talk a little bit about some of the places that you'll be and performances you'll be at?
Oh, that's difficult to do. I mean, well, first of all, thanks for having me here, and I'm glad to be able to participate on the podcast. I have some upcoming performances in state of Florida, like Sarasota Jazz Festival. Friend of mine, Terrell Stafford, who's the artistic director there. I'm going to be there later on in March. Then I'm going to the New Orleans Jazz Fest, which is kind of a big deal because I was supposed to be there in April/May of 2020, and of course we know what happened then. And so they didn't have the festival that year or the next year, and when they did, they pared it down because everyone had to kind of get used to being back in public. But now they've come full circle, so I'm going to be there. I think it's April the 26th, whatever that Saturday is. Yeah, 26th or the 27th. But I'm looking forward to that, and that kind of brings us close to the end of the school year, where my camps and summer festivals will begin. So, and all of those things are kind of listed on my website, but in the interest of not traveling as much as I used to, I don't keep up my schedule like I used to.
But I was just about to ask, how do you kind of balance it all from being a professor here, but also performing, and then, as you mentioned, doing other, community type events? Like, how do you keep it all together?
Well, I'm lucky. I have a great manager, It's like who also happens to be my wife, so she has to keep me on task. And, we book pretty far in advance, about a year and a half, too. I try to keep all of my work now, since I started teaching full-time at the university, I try to keep most of my travels on the weekends. So, and that works out for the most part, except for there are a couple of things that I do during the year, like the jazz cruise, and it's pretty high profile. So that's a week. It used to be Saturday to Saturday. Recently it's Thursday to Thursday. And I do about 2 of those a year. It's in the beginning of the year, so right when school starts, of the spring semester. And then, but everything else that I do during the week, I used to do a camp at Vail for a week, Centrum and Port Townsend, Washington for a week. A couple of things, the NYO New York Orchestra that's connected to Carnegie Hall in Purchase, New York for a week. So, and those are some of the things that I would continue to keep. And I still do master classes, workshops, that type of thing. But I also have my obligations here at the university. So, and I try to balance them around the teaching schedule as well as the performance schedule. So if I have something, a performance scheduled for our jazz ensemble. So we have one performance two performances, but one scheduled performance in the the fall, and two in the spring. But we also go out and we do community events sometimes, whether it's with the churches or Georgia War Veterans Home or the VA, to give the students an opportunity to play in the community. So we have all of those things going on, but scheduling, it's just a matter of doing it as far in advance as possible and, making sure that we can prepare.
I gotcha. And going back a little bit, what would you say drew you to jazz music, and how did you kind of discover that passion for the genre?
Jazz music, well, what drew me to jazz music was a recording. When my great aunt passed, amongst the things that were bequeathed to our family was a 5-record collection set of jazz music. But we were always exposed to music. My dad played, he studied classical music, so we always heard Beethoven, Mozart, Schumann, Schubert in the house, classical piano music. But he played at church. So when we attended, you grew up down south, we attended church, so he could read music, so he played for the choirs. And so we were always exposed to music, but classical and gospel. And growing up in Waynesboro, in the country, we listened to heard country music on the radio as well. But until my great aunt had passed, her record collection wound up at our house and out in our garage. And, had started playing trombone at age 12, so 13. I was at Seago Junior High School, which is now middle school. But, and my friends, we were in band together. And we liked jazz. We liked the popular music of that time, but the jazz of that time was like Herb Alpert and Chuck Mangione, like Rise, do 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 ba ba do dee, or lo do 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 dee. So we listened to that. But on that record collection was it was an anthology of jazz, 10 sides, from early slave chants to the modern jazz of that time. And of all of those sides, somewhere in the middle of there, I fell in love with the music from New Orleans, and particularly Louis Armstrong. So I'd be listening to that all the time. And my friends used to say, well, we all like jazz, but Cliff, he likes that deep jazz. I don't know what that is, but anyway, I guess it was early jazz. And so that was kind of how I found jazz, and how it just, or maybe that was how jazz found me. I don't really know, but I just fell in love with the music because of the creativity and things that we can do, like improvise, and learn eventually the importance of being a part of the jazz community or the musical community. It was important to be your individual, but how to function as a whole inside of the ensemble. And I think that's the one thing that always stuck with me.
Over the years, how would you say your passion for the genre has developed or grown?
My passion for jazz music itself has grown. Well, it's still growing. But I think I learned early on about the importance of developing your individual self so you can contribute to the whole, to the ensemble, as you would do inside of a community. You develop yourself so that you can contribute to the community. And on stage and in jazz band, it's the musical community. You practice, you work on your part. So you bring something to the table, you contribute to the growth and development of the music. And, that never stops. I remember being in college where I attended Florida A&M, and we had let's say a funk band or a popular music band, and we wanted to play all the hits during that time, which was Cameo, Freddie Jackson, and whatever was popular on the radio. Now I love doing this because I could play by ear, but playing jazz meant that you were always developing your improvisation, which is taken from the word improve, which within itself there's always room for growth. A lot of times when I play the popular music, the music was going to be the same every time we played it, and there's nothing wrong with that. But there's something about always getting the opportunity to insert yourself into the music and then make a contribution. It's not always as great as you think it is, but sometimes it's much better than you think anything you could ever come up with. And I always loved that about jazz. It was never stagnant. It was just every time we play, we can play the same song every night. There's an opportunity for us to do something different, to improvise, to improve upon it. So that was something that I loved about playing this music, and then also learning the concepts and then trying to teach them.
Speaking of teaching, as the director of our jazz program here, what is it like teaching students the music and, as you mentioned earlier, like being an individual but also being a part of an ensemble? Like, what does that look like for me, for someone who doesn't study music, so I don't know what that classroom experience would be like?
Well, the first thing you have to learn is the most important thing to do is to listen. Listen to the music. The most important part of developing a conversation is you have to listen. If there's always something going out, then it's difficult for anything to go in. So we learn how to listen. You can listen to something once, but in jazz, you can listen to something, or music in general, you can listen to something 20 times to hear 20 different things. It's almost like a painting. If I were to deal with visual art, we can look at the same painting and see two completely different things. But we're seeing the same thing, but we're impacted two different ways. The same thing happens with music when you're listening, and that's one of the first things I tried to. I don't want to even say teach. It's just to pass on. It's something to share. Say, hey, listen to this. A lot of folks think they don't dig jazz. They don't like jazz, and it's simply because they haven't heard it. And I tell you that because I've taught at many different levels, or I've done master classes and workshops at many different levels. And the hardest group, the most difficult group to reach and to sustain their attention are the young ones. Kindergarten or before, because if you can keep their attention for more than 5 minutes, you're doing something. So, and I remember once I was playing. So I had an instrument called the didgeridoo, and so how many of you like jazz? How many of you like blues? Now this is not their popular music, but if I play something like a shuffle, like if I said we're gonna do this, a doom do doom do doom do doom do doom, you always see a kid doing something like this, or they'll start moving, and that motion means that they're kind of being reached, and all you have to do is expose them to it. So, and if I were to do that, and you as a jazz, someone is interested in maybe hearing jazz, I'd be careful with what I would select. I wouldn't start with John Coltrane's Giant Steps. That's like, whoa, I don't. And I may take something from a Miles Davis record or a Louis Armstrong record, but there's so many, or Count Basie, and just some of the classics. But that is where my exposure would begin. Say, hey, let's just listen. We're not going to talk about it. I'm not going to tell you what you should listen to, what you should buy. Just say, here. It's like the art of negotiating with someone. You invite them into a space that you want them to be in with you. So say, check this out. Listen to this. Well, you don't like that? Check this out. And I guarantee you, there's something in the music, and music in general, but particularly jazz, that everyone will find something they love about it.
living in the digital age that we are in right now, how do you think technology has influenced jazz in terms of performance, but also in terms of education?
Good and bad.
Okay.
Well, I don't want to say good and bad, just good and the other. Like Duke would say. He didn't say bad things about people and music. He said there's a good kind and the other kind. The technology has been good in the sense that the way that you record music, purchase music, you have access to music, access to information. That's great. I think that's the positive side, because if I want to hear something, like when I was in high school or even college, I had to go to the library and check out a book or check out a recording. Now I can just do it on my phone. The the not so upside of that when it comes to recording is, and I run into this now in studios. If you're only accustomed to digital sound and not familiar with acoustic sound, a digital sound can be really clean, which can be great. But I think I was fortunate in that I got a chance to record with the 2-inch tape. And you have maybe a little some of the tape noise, or like when you put on an LP and you have some of the sound of the room. You didn't clean everything out of it. And not that that's necessarily a bad thing, but if you don't know acoustic sound, like the sound of my voice, all you know is digital sound and what AI can do, I think those things are pretty amazing. But then it's hard to really get a sense of the warmth of something. So you hear recording engineers talk about the warmth of the sound. When you go and digitally clean everything out, some of the natural ambiances of the the sound and the sound palette, it's like, nah, that's clean. It sounds almost robotic. I think you know what I'm saying. But one of the advantages of having to have record with acoustic sound and not everything being digital is now you have the access to both. You have all of that information, and I think that it can be. I think it can be a wonderful thing. I like to play without, microphones, or like if someone's recording or doing a sound for a show, I want them to hear what the band sounds like. I want them to know what a band sounds like, not to make the band sound like what he or she wants the band to sound like. Come up and listen to the band. This is how a jazz band sounds. It's acoustic, but we kind of live in an age where everything is just loud. It's like, why is it so loud? So anyway, that's kind of my response to that. But there have been advances in the technology where, you can get information quick. You can, you can purchase my CDs on your phone. Yeah. I still have cassettes. I still have VHS tapes. I'm gonna throw them away one day, maybe. But I like the notes on the LPs from back in the day. I like the notes that they put on the, and everything now you can just get in something that small and just have your whole library. There's something to be said about that. But I'm a little old school, so I still like to write music out by hand, then eventually engrave it. So I do a little bit of both.
Okay. Because you play a number of instruments, if you could magically master any instrument that you don't currently play, which one would it be and why?
I have no idea.
No idea?
No idea. What instrument would I play? I don't know. And master, I don't know, maybe guitar. I feel like this. I play all the instruments I want to play. When I was in high school, went to Butler High School and graduated in 1985. And on my free period, I'd be in the band room. And what was in the band room were instruments. Once you learn the mechanics of what makes an instrument work, like the difference between a trumpet and a trombone, or a tuba and a trombone, well, one's a valve instrument, one's a slide instrument. Once you learn the mechanics of what makes an instrument work, the instrument doesn't make the music, you do. So, I play all the brass instruments, piano, bass, and drums. So one instrument I don't play is the flute. Not sure that I would want to do that, but maybe guitar. But I have a guitar, and I always said that if I wanted to learn an instrument, I'll just purchase it and try to play. But I remember getting to that point. I took a couple of guitar lessons. I said, I play upright and acoustic bass, but I said, nah, I don't. I don't want to play. I don't really want to play guitar, so I didn't study. So that's a hard question. I think I'm happy with the 23 that I do play.
Yeah, I knew it was a lot.
So,
and last question, what advice would you give to aspiring jazz musicians who are just starting their journey and maybe they were curious of studying here, studying under you? What advice would you give them?
Get rid of the notion that there's a shortcut to doing this. The process is the best part of it. The learning process, which means that you have to listen. And, we were talking about technology earlier. Everything's quick. I don't have to go to the library and hope that the book is there because someone didn't check it out. Information is like this. And I was teaching at a university years ago, Michigan State, and a student, I remember him asking, he said, to work on the melodious etudes and arbans and all of those pedagogical things, that's great, but I want to play like, you. So, what's the shortcut? I said, the shortcut is the straightest line from where you're standing to a practice room. So that would be the thing I would try to encourage music students to do, to embrace the process. They develop things where you can lose weight fast, you can build muscles fast. Learning to master an instrument, they don't have that yet. And I don't think that, and again, if they do develop it, they have musical. You can buy gadgets at the music store. You just press a button, it'll do everything you want it to do. But then are you playing the music? So I would say to embrace the process because that's the most important part of it. Muhammad Ali said that about boxing. I used to love to watch him when I was younger. He said, it's not when he's under the lights the night of the fight. He said you win the fight by preparing for the fight. And that's, the miles that you put in, everything leading up to the fight. That's just now it's time to take all of that you've worked on and you kind of put that to work. So when I tell my students that nowadays, embrace the process. And because of technology, the information is easier to get the information. But you still have to go through the process of, getting it in there, listening, listen, which is the easiest thing to do, because all you have to do is open your ears and close your mouth. So, that's what I would do, and listen in groups. You want to play with the group, and have discussions, and be open to accepting things that you may think that are different. I won't even say that you don't like, because while this pertains to music, this pertains to everything in life, and I think that if you are open, then you can make the musical world a better one and the world at large a better one. So, embrace the process.
Well, thank you for being here. I said last question, but also really quickly, who are some of your favorite musicians, jazz musicians, that you would recommend to someone who just wants to immerse themselves in the genre, that first time wanting to get into jazz, who would you tell them to check out first?
Louis Armstrong, Miles Davis, Duke Ellington, Sarah Vaughan, Ella Fitzgerald, but pretty much the the masters, and there are many. But the folks would ask me oftentimes, "Who's your favorite musician?" I always say Louis Armstrong because he embodied everything that jazz is about. I said Duke Ellington's name second because I'm reminded of something that Duke said about Louis Armstrong. He said Louis Armstrong came from nothing. He was poor, gained everything in the world, and didn't hurt anybody along the way. And if you know Louis Armstrong's story, he did. He grew up in the poorest part of Stewartville. And so I always loved his music when I was younger, but then learning about him as I become an adult and a man, that's what made me, that's what manifests itself in his music. And people love Pops, everywhere that he went because that was what was in the spirit and that came out in his music. He loved everybody. He thought that regardless of what happened with the racism that he grew up in and dealt with, Pops just said, he says, okay, they're just not hip. They're not, they don't, they'll get it. But he loved everybody in spite of. And the music was a way for him to play through all of that. Like I said, like Duke said, he gained everything. Didn't hurt anybody along the way. And even when he was, for a lack of it, but he was rich. His manager said he lived in Corona, Queens. He didn't want to live in an apartment. He just loved being on the road. He said, come on out here on Long Island, get you a mansion, get away from all those people. And he was like, what? I love it here in the neighborhood. How he grew up, regardless of how what he attained in the world, his feet never left the ground. He wanted to stay around the people in the neighborhood, Joe's barbershop, the kids in the neighborhood he called his little ice cream eaters. And he said, why would I want to go out there and get away from, the people on his block that's in Corona, Queens now, the Louis Armstrong House and Museum. And then they have an educational foundation, and how he bought a facade for the people on his block. He loved being around people, and that never changed, no matter how much money he made. And I didn't know that when I was younger, but as I began to do programs, master classes, and workshops, and learn about him and how he endured everything that he endured, and these are United States, but still had a positive view and outlook and hope for people. Just like, he's my favorite musician because of the music, but one of my favorite people because what was manifesting in his music was what was in his heart and his desire for. So I would say listen to Louis Armstrong, and I can tell you, people ask, what's your favorite Louis Armstrong recording? I said, all of them. So, but yeah, sorry for that long answer, but
No, you're fine. I appreciate it. Definitely got some new artists well, not necessarily new artists, but some artists to add to my playlist when I get out of here. So I appreciate it.
you can always email me. I'll give you my personal email address. I'll send you. Happy to send you a list, and don't worry, it won't be magnanimous. But you start with one, you'll create a rabbit hole for yourself. That's what happened with me. I was like, oh, I like this. Oh, and he played with Louis Armstrong. And I was like, oh, wow. And then Louis and Duke together. I'm like, wow, this, So, I still get excited about it. And I've been doing it since I was, and listening to the music since I was 13, 14. But anyway, so.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so I hope y'all enjoyed that episode. I certainly did. I love talking and catching up with Dr. Williams, and Wycliffe was so fun to talk to as well. I definitely have some musicians to add to my playlist. I hope y'all get to add some of those. So I'm definitely going to check out Donna Summer, Louis Armstrong, Duke Ellington, a couple of others out there too that they mentioned that I wanted to check out over the next couple of months or days. It's also Black History Month, so if you want to check out some Black artists that have made impact in those areas, feel free to do that as well. And until then, I'll catch y'all in the next one. But let me know on Instagram what y'all think of this episode and who are some of the artists that y'all listen to. So do that, and I'll see y'all later.